Hello everyone, welcome back to Reading with Raptors. I'm a little sad I didn't start this like a minute sooner. We just missed this bird spending, I think, about 30 whole seconds scratching her head. So hopefully she'll continue doing some more preening and stretching and scratching in the background. We're just having a very, very comfortable time. So hopefully we'll get to see some of that going on. As we get going here, we'll give everyone a few minutes to get on. Since I'm talking about her, the bird behind me is a red-tailed hawk that we call Alula. I'll talk a little bit more about that maybe after we read our book about where we get that name from. So I have a couple little samples for us to look at up close because Alula is actually the name of a type of feather that's really important to a lot of flying birds. So we'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later. So today, I thought we would read this book. I haven't read yet, but I've been eyeing the whole last couple of months, called About Raptors, a guide for children. I don't think it's particularly just for children. I think that it includes a lot of really good information for the rest of us. And it has some really incredible artwork that I'm really excited about. So we'll get started with that. So this is, scooch over a little bit so you can still see her. So this is, again, red-tailed hawk here in the background. And we're gonna be reading About Raptors. And this is by Cathryn Sill and illustrated by John Sill. Scooch over a little bit more so you can still see her. So here's right away the title page. We have this. Sorry, we'll cover her up a little bit when we zoom in, but there's this wonderful little picture of a bald eagle. I think we'll see a little bit later on again too. So, raptors are birds of prey that hunt and eat other animals. And so, one thing I really like about this book is that it calls the pictures plates, just like they call them in field guides. So this one says, plate number 1, great gray owl. Also shown, a meadow vole. So we have this great gray owl swooping in with these big fluffy feet. And down here, this little trail, there's that meadow vole that it is hunting. So this beautiful picture of somewhere very far up north, very snowy, lots of nice kind of aspen and evergreen trees. So that is the great gray owl. So raptors are birds of prey that hunt and eat other animals. They have hooked beaks for tearing meat into bite-sized pieces. So this is plate number 2, a bald eagle. So this is a wonderful kind of oceanside scene, it looks like, with lots of beautiful waves and these rocks. And we have a bald eagle here eating fish using its curved, sharp beak. And then up here we also have a bald eagle soaring off in the distance. Most raptors have strong feet with sharp claws that help them catch and hold prey. So this is plate number 3, a red-tailed hawk. So you can see it using those curved, sharp claws and the strong feet to hold on to, it looks like a nice fluffy squirrel. You can see that bright red tail there too. That's the same as the bird behind us, who's doing a little bit of preening in the background. Raptors search for prey by looking and listening. And this is plate number 4, the secretary bird. So this is a very unusual raptor that lives in kind of the African Serengeti, those big open grasslands. It has very long legs, so it's very tall, but it's still using its eyes to look, its ears to listen for its food before it uses its big strong feet to grab onto its food. So a little bit unusual, not one that we normally talk about here in Minnesota. They fly and hunt in different ways. So here we have plate number 5. This has 3 birds on it. We have a turkey vulture, a goshawk, and a gyrfalcon. So you have a soaring raptor. You have a raptor who's doing lots of short flights through open or kind of tree forested areas. So it has kind of shorter, rounder wings. And then you have a gyrfalcon, who is a type of large falcon that lives in the Arctic, So they do a lot of kind of tall or very high altitude flights. They fly up really high and then they can dive down at their food, other birds usually. So lots of different ways to fly and hunt. Some raptors capture prey in the air. And this plate is a merlin, and it's chasing after these violet-green swallows. So this small falcon is chasing after these very small birds, catching them in the air. See, those long pointy wings are great for that kind of thing. Some more preening in the background here. We have to preen underneath our wings. It's very important. Others hunt for animals on the ground. So this is a golden eagle chasing after a black-tailed jackrabbit. So using those powerful wings to chase down that very fast rabbit. Some raptors snatch food from the water. This plate is of an osprey in the middle of a big open lake or in a river or out in the ocean even. You can see it grabbing a fish right out of the water. It's very cool to see. Others hunt for animals that are already dead. So this plate shows the Ruppel's griffin and the African white-backed vulture. So you have two different kinds of African vultures in this picture. Getting those big open grasslands. It looks like they are feasting on a zebra. So you can see them all coming in off in the distance, all showing up to help get rid of this dead zebra. Very important job. Raptors may hunt during the day. And for example, these are swallow-tailed kites. Kites have some incredibly long wings and these very long tails. Yeah, the artwork in this book I think is just stunning. I'm glad that they give it a whole page to itself. So that was raptors may hunt during the day or at night. And this is a tawny owl hunting a house mouse. So here we have this tawny owl, kind of a smaller owl. And you can tell because it's looking for something as small as a house mouse, which we know are pretty tiny. So you can see it in this dark forest, still able to track down that mouse. Some very intensive preening happening, which is excellent. Sorry, I won't bother you. Raptors use different kinds of nests to care for their babies. So this one is of a northern harrier. So here it is surrounded by grasses. Northern harriers nest on the ground. So we have one of the adult northern harriers, and then here underneath its wing is poking out a little tiny baby harrier head. So keeping nice and safe down there underneath those tall grasses. Some raptors have large nests high in trees. And this is a picture of a harpy eagle, one of the largest eagles in the entire world. You can see it on this big tree with this really big nest way up high. That baby who's already getting quite large, I'm sure. This is in the Amazon rainforest. That's where this would be. This is the harpy eagle, a high up nest. Others use holes to protect their eggs and chicks. This is a picture of an elf owl, or two elf owls. They're living inside a hole in a cactus. So you can see these elf owls are so tiny, the smallest owls in the world. They're so tiny that look how big that grasshopper looks in the mouth of that little owl. So they're hunting things like grasshoppers and other big insects and living inside of cactuses. Cacti, I guess is the better word for that. Living inside of a cactus. Some raptors have nests on cliffs or ledges. And this is the plate showing Prairie Falcon nest. So you can see them on this nice big cliff over these big open plains. So kind of where the mountains and the open plains are meeting. So here's the Prairie Falcon and a few chicks. Looks like these rocks are covered with some nice mosses and lichens. It also looks like there are some other nests in the area, maybe belonging to some swifts or some swallows. Others nest on the ground. This is a picture of a short-eared owl. Looks like they're nesting at the time when all of the grasses in the area are flowering. So you can see this nice little nest here on the ground. That is a short-eared owl you can find in grasslands all around the world. So it makes sense if they're nesting on the ground if there aren't any trees around. Makes a lot of sense. Raptors live almost everywhere in the world. So this is a lot of different raptors to show all the different places that raptors can live. So up here we have a red-shouldered hawk living in these kind of lake or pond areas around water. Here we have a snowy owl living really far up north where there's lots of snow and really no trees, so it's standing here on the ground. Here we have a collared forest falcon. So this is a falcon that's living in what looks like probably a rainforest of some sort. I want to say that these are found in Southeast Asia, but I'd have to double check. I think it'll tell me later on in the book. This one is a common barn owl, and you can see it's living inside of this big billboard sign. So these barn owls are living really close by people. And then this is a Harris hawk, which is also standing on top of a cactus. So you can find it in the southwestern part of the US and kind of northern Mexico, living on top of things like cacti. It is important to protect raptors and the places where they live. So here we have another beautiful landscape showing peregrine falcons living on the side of a cliff, probably in springtime with all those flowers, big kind of open grassy areas and nice tall cliffs for them to live near. It's important to protect these kinds of natural places. So here we have a little bit of extra information. So about each of these kind of descriptions. So I'll read a couple. I want to make sure I know where the collared forest falcon lives, so I'll definitely read that one. So this one about the great gray owl, it says, there are around 450 types of raptors in the world. The word raptor comes from the Latin word rapare, it's an excellent rouse, which means to seize or to snatch away. So think of something grabbing onto something else. That's where you get the word raptor. Raptors live on every continent except Antarctica. Great gray owls are one of the largest owls. They have a wingspan of up to 60 inches. Great gray owls live in the northern parts of North America, Europe, and Asia. So again, that was that great gray owl picture. You'll see if I can flip back to it. So this is about the great gray owl picture. About our bald eagle picture, some more information. Raptors are predators whose diets include small mammals, fish, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and insects. A very few raptors sometimes eat fruit. Bald eagles mostly eat fish. They live near large bodies of water across most of North America. So that bald eagle. There's also some more information on our red-tailed hawk from this picture. The sharp claws on raptors' feet are called talons. When a raptor catches its prey, the talons lock into the animal and keep it from escaping. Red-tailed hawks, the most common hawks in North America, are often seen perched on dead trees or utility poles along roadsides. They live throughout most of North America and parts of Central America. So those are red-tailed hawk, same as the red-tailed hawk who's been doing all of this preening work behind me. Let's find some more interesting ones. Some more information about we'll talk about the secretary bird. So this is the secretary bird. I don't get to talk about secretary birds nearly enough because they live so very far away. But this one says, raptors have large eyes and are able to see very well. They also have good hearing, which helps them find prey they cannot see. Secretary birds hunt by walking along looking for food on the ground. They kill their prey by kicking it with their long legs and thick toes. Secretary birds live in Africa. So So you can see they have these very long legs and they kick their prey. A lot of times things like snakes or other small animals living in these grasses. So just like other raptors, they use their feet to catch their food, but they also will kick their food before they try to pick it up. Which if I was hunting something like snakes, I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, let's skip around a little bit. We'll find a couple more. We'll talk a little bit about this one, which was about vultures. So this plate that was about vultures. It's a little bit more info. Some raptors are scavengers. Instead of looking for live prey, vultures hunt and eat carrion or dead animals. Most vultures have nearly bare heads. The lack of feathers on their heads helps keep vultures clean and germ-free even when they eat rotting meat. Vultures are very helpful as nature's garbage collectors. Sometimes more than one kind of vulture will feed on the same dead animal. Ruppel's griffins and African white-backed vultures live in Africa. So those are these two kinds of vultures that we see here. Again, really cool to think about. I know here in Minnesota and a lot of the upper kind of North America, we only have the one kind of vulture. So you might not see a ton of different kinds of vultures eating at one dead animal because we don't have any other vultures. But as you go further south in North America, you might get black vultures as well. And in other parts of the world, there are lots of different species of vultures all living in the same area, which I always think is really cool to think about. But I think vultures are really excellent. We'll do one or two more. A little bit more about, because I think they're wonderful also, and we don't get to talk about them very much because they don't live here in Minnesota either. But this was the plate about the elf owls. So raptors that nest in holes do not create them. They use holes made by other birds or animals. Elf owls often nest in holes made by woodpeckers in giant cactuses or trees. Elf owls at 5.5 inches are one of the smallest raptors in the world. They live in the southwestern United States and Mexico. So these were the elf owls. And I think it's really important to think about these owls need holes made by other animals to nest in. So we think a lot about raptors being really important for the work that they do in hunting, but all these other animals are really important too to help kind of create the environment that they're all living in. So the nest holes that a lot of other animals are using are made by things like woodpeckers or rodents, things like that. Really important. We'll do one more, and this was about our last picture about the peregrine falcons. Oh wait, I was gonna see if it said, the collared forest falcons live in tropical forests in Central and South America. Perfect. So I was a little bit off. So these collared forest falcons, they are living in South America, which is really cool. A little bit closer to here than I thought. Someone was asking, what does an elf owl eat? Since they are so small, they're usually eating things like really big insects, your grasshoppers, maybe some dragonflies, usually things that are out at night though. So grasshoppers or moths, maybe some nice beetles. They might also catch things like very small mammals, so little mice and voles, maybe a shrew, usually those really small creatures. She's sticking her leg out, and hopefully you can see it pretty well. A lot of times people are surprised by how long raptor and other bird legs are because they're always hidden underneath those fluffy feathers. So right now she's got her whole leg kind of relaxed out. So instead of tucking in her knee like she normally would, she's letting her knee kind of extend out, and that's when you can see that whole leg hanging out. You can see just how long those legs are. She's tipping her head to look at us. So one last one we'll talk about in a little bit more detail was this picture of the peregrine falcons on the cliff. And we were saying that it's important to protect raptors and the places where they live. Let's see what it says about that. Raptors are a valuable part of our world. They hunt rodents, insects, and other animals that destroy crops and damage property. Many kinds of raptors are in danger because of illegal hunting, pesticides, pollution, and habitat destruction. At one time, peregrine falcons were nearly extinct in parts of the United States. Pesticides such as DDT made their eggshells thin and easily broken, causing the babies to die. Peregrine falcon numbers are growing in places where DDT is no longer used. They live in many different habitats all over the world. So I really like the story about DDT because it shows that we can change things. If we're doing things that are hurting the wildlife or the environment around us, or might be hurting us as well, we can realize what's happening and we can change and we can do even better in the future. So now we know that DDT can cause all these problems and we've stopped using it and are trying to stop using it in a lot of different places. And we saw the great results that happened. So we got a lot of these birds back that we were missing out on. So we were able to create a much healthier environment and we saw great results from that. So for example, here in Minnesota, for a lot of the late 1900s, peregrine falcons were what we call extirpated, which is the scientific term for locally extinct. So there were peregrine falcons in other places, but there weren't any left here. So that was true for a lot of the Midwestern kind of North America here in the US and Canada. So we were able to realize that we could stop using this pesticide or this insect-killing chemical called DDT, and we were able to do better and figure out better ways to protect our wildlife and our environment around us. So I always think it's such a great story to hear because I think it's a really optimistic one and that we know it's possible. So that was that picture of those peregrine falcons on that cliff. So here in the background, we've had this red-tailed hawk doing some wonderful preening in the background. She's been really getting into those like neck and wing feathers. So it's really important that she spends a lot of time taking care of those feathers. So what she's doing is kind of using her beak. So this is actually a feather that she dropped earlier because a lot of our birds are molting right now. So she's taking her beak and kind of zipping it along those feathers to kind of, if it kind of gets a little bit messy or frayed, she can take her beak and kind of zip it back into place. My fingers aren't nearly as good at it as her beak would be. She can kind of zip it back into place. So she's doing a lot of very important work right now, trying to put all those feathers back together. She also earlier, I thought this was fun, so I thought I'd show you all. So since she is molting and losing those old feathers and growing in new ones, she also found a little bit of extra activity to do with those feathers. So this is what she did to one of her feathers that she molted probably sometime yesterday afternoon or this morning, where she molted it perfectly, a perfect condition feather, and then decided that it would be really fun to rip it up and play with it. So this just shows you kind of what a very determined red-tailed hawk can do with their feet and their beak, is they're able to really do all of this. So you can see just how kind of strong, even when they're not getting any food out of it, but even if they're just kind of interacting with something like their own feather sitting around, they can be very strong, very good at using those curved, sharp beaks. Why? Oh, someone was asking, why are they molting and how often does that happen? Yeah, really good question, thank you. So every year, these birds will do molt. And so what that means is that they lose a lot of their feathers and grow in new ones, which is really important. So even if you look at, so even this feather, for example, this is like a nice fluffy kind of, it looks like a wing feather that was probably over kind of on the sides of her wings. So not a flight feather, but one of these kind of nice, smooth outside feathers you see on the sides of her wing. So this feather, she might have grown it in a year or two ago. It's getting a little bit worn out. So the colors have gotten faded on it. The ends can get a little bit scraggly over time. Even though she's taking really good care of those feathers, they're still going through a lot of stress anytime she's flapping her wings and flying, anytime she's sitting out in the sun for long periods of time. All of those things can slowly damage feathers over time. So to prevent being in a situation where her feathers aren't functioning as well as they need to keep her dry and warm and flying and all of that, these birds will lose their old feathers and grow in new ones. So this is a feather that probably grew in last year or maybe 2 years ago. And it would have been attached into her wing at this kind of base of what we call the shaft here of the feather. So it attaches in right here at the tip inside of her skin. And then when it's time for her to lose it, she just drops it off of the skin, it falls off, and then she can work on growing in a new feather. So kind of the same way as if You know, as if some of your, like a strand of your hair comes out. There's still something inside of your scalp that then will regrow that hair. It was just, something was damaged or something like that. Doing a very good stretch right now. Now, the really interesting thing about these raptors is that there are different ways for birds to molt their feathers. So sometimes you get something like a duck who might lose almost all of their feathers at once and really quick try to regrow all of them all together at once, which works really well for something like a duck who can still go out in the water and swim and look for food, even if it doesn't have feathers to really fly around with. But for something like a raptor who needs to be able to fly and hunt, they can't take a few weeks off of doing that. They need to be able to hunt, to eat. So what they do instead is they slowly lose all of their feathers over the course of a few months. So it really takes them most of the spring and summer to really lose all of the feathers that they're going to replace that year. Her head was fully buried inside of her tummy feathers, which is pretty excellent. So what they'll do, especially on their wing and on their tail feathers, is that they'll lose the same feathers kind of from either side. So if on this wing she loses this feather here, on her other wing she'll lose the same feather from the same spot at the same time. So that way, even if it might affect her flight a little bit, it's at least even. So it's evenly affecting it on both sides, so that way she's not kind of off center and a little bit wobbly while she's flying. So very important for these birds to have a very good molt every year. I will show you one more thing since we're talking about molting, is that these birds have been losing some of my favorite feathers, which are the Alula feathers. This is where this bird gets her name. And so these Alula feathers are some very special feathers that sit up near the wrist of a bird. I have a wing here. So this is a wing from a great horned owl. And to give you an idea of what we're talking about, I'll show you it from the other side. So this part up here is kind of like where your shoulder would be. There's a bone that kind of comes down into here. Where are we at? So there's a bone kind of down in here that's kind of like where your elbow is. And then up here, kind of near the top, is like where your wrist would be. And then everything kind of down here, these are all those feathers. So the actual bones of the wing end up here. So kind of where your wrist would be, is kind of like where your thumb would be. There are these special feathers that kind of can poke out. So a bird can kind of poke out that little thumb bone that they have and move these very special feathers here on this wing, and these are called the Alula feathers. And so they have a special shape to them, because what Alula feathers do is they increase the amount of feathers, or the surface area on the wing. So even as the bird is slowing down, it has a bigger wing area, so it's able to stay up in the air even though it's going slower. So normally when you'll see them use an Alula is when they're coming down to land. They go from having their wings flat out to kind of tilting their wings forward to kind of help them slow down. And then you'll see that little boop, Alula feather stick up. So they have a very special shape. So instead of sticking out straight, they kind of look a little bit curved. Like they have this really interesting shape to them. So they always look a little bit different from their other feathers. So you can tell which ones are the Alulas. So this one especially shows up. This is one from a great horned owl, this is from a barred owl. So it kind of comes out really far and then kind of curves up and around to help be a really kind of stiff feather to help kind of catch that breeze. So that is where she gets the name Alula, because those Alula feathers are really important. They're really important to a lot of birds that are needing to do some nice controlled flight. But for something like a red-tailed hawk, who needs to kind of fly down and then swoop down to try to grab onto its prey, those Alula feathers are really important for being able to control the speed and the rate of that kind of swoop down onto their prey. So those Alula feathers are very important. I'm gonna see, I'll scroll back through and just really quick check and see if I missed any other questions. Oh, I see some folks have some birds in their backyard, a sharp-shinned hawk in your Midway neighborhood. That's awesome. Being able to see those birds. Sharpshins we are starting to see more of in these kind of urban areas. We're pretty used to seeing a lot of Cooper's hawks. Really good face scratch. We're used to seeing a lot of Cooper's hawks, but I'm really excited. We've been seeing, I also have some Merlins in my neighborhood too, which is not a thing we used to see, but it's been really interesting to see some of these smaller raptors making some adaptations to more of an urban lifestyle, which is always really interesting to see them adapt. Because that is one of the bigger problems facing a lot of raptors is habitat loss. So knowing that some of these other birds can start adapting to that as well is certainly a mixed bag as far as issues go, but certainly good to see them being able to adapt to that as well. Kind of speaks really well for their future. So that's awesome to know that they're around. Some really good preening. That's one other thing I'll say about preening is when she's kind of poking down at her tail, there's a little spot, a little gland on the top of her tail that produces oil that she has to rub on her feathers. It's kind of like if you are, you're in the shower, you're in the bathtub and you're washing your hair, you kind of wash it with shampoo to clean it, and then you might put on some conditioner. And so to kind of keep everything like soft and nice, she kind of has like built-in conditioner that she makes in a gland that sits kind of at the base of her tail, and that's gonna help keep her feathers really nice and waterproof, and it's gonna help kind of treat them so that they can stay really nice and intact. So that's really important. So if you see a bird kind of sticking their head down by their tail, it's kind of what they're doing. Do a couple more questions here. How can we tell the difference in what is in our backyard? I don't think I've made it through a single week without mentioning allaboutbirds.org, or the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. They have some great tools for identifying what is in your backyard, or if you're seeing birds around you. So if you check that out, they have a wonderful, or if you have a phone that you like to use apps on, they have the Merlin Bird Id App, which is also super helpful because you can go, okay, I don't know what kind of bird that was, I know where I was, I know when it was, and I know I saw the bird sitting in a tree. Okay, what birds that are brown and gray am I likely to see sitting in a tree in this area at this time of year? And it'll give you a list, and you can look at the pictures and see, oh, okay, it didn't look like that, it didn't look like that. Ah, that looks like it. Let me listen to the sound. Yes, that sounds exactly like what I heard. Awesome. So I'm a really big fan of everything that the Cornell Lab is doing. So I'm sorry, I probably mention it every single week, but it's always really, really helpful. So if you're interested in learning more about the birds that you have in your backyard or in your local parks, or if you're out on walks, definitely check them out. They've got some really helpful tools to help you figure out what you're seeing, because I always think that that's really helpful to kind of be able to figure out what you have living in your neighborhood. Sorry, I think she almost lost her balance while she was preening, which is great. One more. Oh, and how do raptors manage the heat and humidity on a day like yesterday? So it kind of depends on the kind of bird. A lot of times they're looking for places that are kind of breezy and a little bit shaded. So they're going to try to sit in the shade to stay out of the sun. If they're living kind of near forested areas, they might kind of try to go a little bit further in, so kind of off of the areas where you get all of that kind of sun baking the earth and then kind of causing that warm air to rise. Try to go a little bit further into a little bit more wooded area where there's a little bit more kind of moisture in the air, and a little bit more shade to kind of help keep everything a little bit cooler. Baths are great. You'll see them finding little puddles of water or going to the edges of streams or lakes to kind of splash around, get a little bit wet so that they can kind of cool off that way. Just like I'm sure a lot of us want to go jump in a lake when it's super warm out. So they'll do a lot of that. So they're very good at finding those kind of a little bit shadier, cooler, breezier places. So they're able to keep themselves cool that way, definitely. You'll also see them, so when we get really warm, we tend to get really sweaty. That's how we cool off. But birds, they don't really sweat. So in order to also help cool themselves off, they'll open their mouths and they'll pant. And that'll help kind of cycle that air through their bodies to help lower that internal temperature. Their body temperature tends to be a little bit warmer than ours, kind of in the low 100 degrees or so, around like 105, 106, somewhere in there. And so they tend to stay a little bit warmer than us, so cycling that air through can really help them cool off as well. So it's very important. And then, of course, my favorite way of staying cool, of course, belongs to the turkey vultures, who do eurohydrosis, which means that they release their liquid waste onto their own legs, where it evaporates and cools them off. So that is also an option if you are a turkey vulture in this area. If you were a turkey vulture outside yesterday when it was super warm, that is another way that they could have stayed cool as well. Not one I would recommend for us, but we do basically the same thing by sweating instead. So luckily we don't need to. Excellent waste elimination there. So I think we'll wrap up here, but I do want to make sure I tell you all about a really fantastic kind of new opportunity that we have. We are, as we kind of look forward into this summer and kind of going forward, we are starting a kind of short online program series that we are starting this Friday. So we just posted on our Facebook page, we posted an event for it. So this Friday, we're going to be starting, they are 20-minute online programs that you can log into. We're offering them via Zoom. And so you can come on and you'll meet one bird each week. So you can see them kind of up close. Someone will be talking a lot about them, and there's also lots of opportunities for questions as well. So if you've been liking these Reading with Raptors programs, I think you'll also really enjoy this new kind of online series of programs as well. So definitely check those out. We'll be posting some of those. Like I said, there's an event up already, and we'll be posting more about those as we go along. We're also really excited about some other kind of new online program opportunities that we have as well for trying to figure out how to bring larger programs to folks too. So definitely keep an eye on our page and on our website for more of those opportunities as we go along. But for sure, check out the one about this Friday for a little opportunity. You are going to have the opportunity to meet a great horned owl up close. I'm really excited. We were testing it out yesterday, so very excited for that. So check that out. One final question, someone was asking about how old this red-tailed hawk is. So this red-tailed hawk, we actually are fairly certain is a female red-tailed hawk, simply because she is quite large for a red-tailed hawk. And in the raptor world, that usually means that that bird is female. So she is one of the larger red-tailed hawks actually that lives here at the Raptor Center. And so she is 13 years old this year. So she came in as a first-year bird. And she came in after we're fairly certain that she had West Nile virus, which she most likely got from a mosquito. So what it did is it actually affected the function of her eyes. So she actually has some kind of permanent scarring in her eyes caused by that virus. That's what it tends to do to things like hawks especially. And so it made it so that she's not able to see as well as she would need to live out in the wild. So that happened about 13 years ago. Obviously, she's great now. We were able to help her support her while she got better. But because of the damage to her eyes, she wasn't able to be released. So she's an excellent candidate for sitting here and preening in front of a camera or in front of people when when we're out and about. So now she's been kind of she was looking around and kind of tilting her head, which is always wonderful. So that is this red-tailed hawk. So you hopefully will be seeing her more as we go along again as we start these online programs. So again, thank you all so much for joining us today. We will see you again next Tuesday for Reading with Raptors. But in the meantime, check it out. Hopefully you can join us on Friday for our new program series about meeting raptors kind of up close. So thank you all so much for joining us. We will see you all next week. Have a great week in the meantime. Drink lots of water. Put on sunscreen. It's been very warm out. And continue to enjoy. Keep an eye out for those birds outside while keeping safe and healthy. We'll see you all next week. Bye.